let's bring in Health and Human Services Secretary Bobby Kennedy Jr. Now, last month, he got rid of a recommendation panel, which, by the way, had to be litigated. But Bobby had, the Secretary of HHS has every legal right to change advisory panels. Why he changes them? Well, that's what you talk about. But the idea that it was weird that he did it, that's what the power is. And either you use the power or you don't. Bobby, thank you for joining us. So what was the motivation for the switch for the vaccine recommendation panel? And what have you thought of the changes that you've made? All I can see so far is they came out getting rid of a lead additive, which you'll be able to pronounce better than I, from certain vaccines. People had said it was safe in those amounts. Others disagreed, including the people on your panel. What do you think the change was about, and what does it mean to you today?
Well, that panel is... this was a long time coming, Chris. That panel has been under attack for 20 years. In 2002, Congress investigated the panel and found that 97% of the people who sit on it have conflicts with the pharmaceutical industry. And in fact, the congressional investigation cited one case where 4 out of 5 members of the panel were working for Merck when they approved a vaccine for Merck. And one of the people on that panel who voted had a patent on that vaccine, which he then sold for $186 million. So we wanted to make sure there are people on that panel for the first time in history that don't have conflicts of interest, that are not making money by voting themselves rich. And we brought a group of scientists on the panel. We're going to add to that scientists for the next meeting that are independent, neutral, that are voting for public health. And I'll give you one example. That panel, we've gone up under the jurisdiction of that panel. We've gone from 11 doses of 5 vaccines in 1986, when the panel was started, to 69 to 92 doses of 19 vaccines today, and not one of those vaccines was ever tested for safety. So this was absolute malpractice, and we're going to make sure that every vaccine is tested for safety, so that physicians and patients can understand the risk profile and the benefits of each vaccine, each product that's approved.
Hey, Bobby, I want to ask you about fears from some quarters that are coming out about the measles vaccine, the MMR vaccine, and you wanting to tie it to autism as if this is some alternative agenda. I'll tee it up for you so you know that we're going to talk about it. But you know what? It's silly for me to ignore your perspective on something else. Everybody knows you're the Health and Human Services Secretary, someone else. But you're also Bobby Kennedy Jr. And not just your own family's experience, but your own personal experience and what we're seeing come in our society. In terms of our overall health as a society, I do want you to weigh in on this. Do you think my analysis is wrong about how extremism is just the new mode of political activity, and that we're just going to see more and more of this violence as long as we keep pushing one another on social media to be more and more provocative, more and more outrageous, and more hostile in terms of how we talk to people who disagree with ourselves?
I mean, I think social media definitely amplifies those kind of impulses. I also think there's even deeper problems. There's systemic and societal problems and governmental problems. People don't trust the media anymore, Chris. People don't trust the government anymore. And there's reasons that they don't, because the government and the media lie to them. And so there's no real centralized, like when you and I grew up, we could go on Walter Cronkite and we knew what he was telling us was the truth. We knew that our political leaders, for the most part, were honest with us. We knew that regulatory officials would also tell the truth to the American public. And today, people don't trust those institutions anymore. So they're looking for other sources of truth. And I think people are prone to paranoia when they see that the government is acting against their interests, when they see that the other major institutions in our society are acting against their interests. And it makes people more divided, more polarized. And, it divides us as a nation. It really destroys the unity of our nation. It destroys the societal connections. There's a crisis of dispossession in this country. There's a crisis of alienation. And we have a generation of kids that's now really, in many ways, purposeless. They're looking for purpose. They're looking to be effective citizens, but we're not giving them those kind of opportunities the way that you and I had when we were growing up. And I think that also needs to be taken into consideration.
Every few weeks, we see somebody killing somebody now in a misplaced sense of political activism. They're going to have to change the definition of terrorism under American federal law, because all of this is going to wind up being terrorism, and they're going to have to figure it out, because the laws were designed to keep inimical factors from without, who created cells within, one level of punishment. But now, more often than not, these are our own people doing this to us. So in your thinking about it, and I'm sure, I know as a matter of fact, you've experienced it personally, people threatening you just because they don't agree with you, wanting to hurt you, wanting to hurt your family. That's not how it's always been. What do you think can get us to a better place, Bobby? What have you figured out while you've been in the role and actually been inside the machine?
I try to stay within my guardrails. I try to look at the things that I actually can change, and we're looking at the contribution of SSRI drugs, which are new in the experience of humanity, at black box warnings against violence, against suicidal ideation, against homicidal ideation. We need to look at the contribution that they have to the generalized violence. We need to look at the declines in public health, which are dramatic, and the food supply, which also affects moods, it affects depression, it affects mental illness. If people are mitochondrially challenged anymore, there's a professor at Harvard, Dr. Pollan, who is actually curing schizophrenia with using dietary changes. And there are case after case of that. So I really try to focus on the things that I can change here at HHS, and then hope everybody else is doing their job to make this situation better.
Good. And of course, part of your role in doing that, and you're right to stay within your lane, you got enough to deal with. The boogeyman attached to the latest efforts with the MMR vaccine is that Bobby Kennedy is so bent on proving that autism comes from vaccines that now he's going to do it with one of the best known and tested vaccines, the MMR vaccine, which is really important to society, and he's going to mess with it. That's the concern out there from the latest reporting. What do you want people to know about what this is about?
Well, first of all, I've never targeted the MMR vaccine. I've written 5 books on vaccines, and none of them have targeted the MMR vaccine. What I've said is that we should do testing, and we should particularly test for autism on vaccines. The MMR has actually been tested, but the 6 vaccines that are the primary culprits, the 6 vaccines that are, or the 8 vaccines, I beg your pardon, that are given during the first 6 months of life, none of them have ever been tested for their link to autism. The Institute of Medicine, which is part of the National Academy of Sciences, has been scolding and rebuking CDC since 1991 to do those tests. It did it in 2013, and it demanded again, you need to do those studies. In 2014, CDC has never done them. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to look at those. We're going to look at all the potential sources of the etiology of autism, not just vaccines, but food, changes in our environment, changes in behavior, any possible. We need to know, listen, Chris, autism rates in 1970 were 0.7 in 10,000, so less than 1 in 10,000. The biggest epidemiological study in history was done in Wisconsin in 1970, and it validated many other studies from the same era. And it looked at 900,000 kids who was looking for autism. 900,000 kids had found 3. They said this is what the rate is, 0.7 in 10,000. Well, today it's 1 in 10. It's 1 in every 31 children. And it's actually probably worse than that because California, which has the best collection protocols, in its state is reporting 1 in every 19 children, 1 in every 12.5 boys. So something is causing it, and we know it's an environmental factor. Genes do not cause epidemics. They can provide a vulnerability, but you need an environmental toxin. What we're going to do over the next 6 months is we're going to identify the environmental toxins that are actually causing it, and then we are going to work to eliminate them.
Look, it's obviously a noble goal. I don't want people out there to think that I believe that an autism diagnosis automatically means that your kid is less than. A lot of these kids are incredibly special. I know in your family and my family, we've experienced it in many different aspects and variations. So it's a big question mark. But one answer is, well, Bobby, the reason we get a lot more now is because everything gets a diagnosis these days. Every kid has at least 2 diagnoses for what we used to just call behavior. So now they're putting all these kids on the autism spectrum because that is that is kind of like the fashion of the moment. That's the answer to why we're seeing more. Do you accept that?
No, that is nonsense. It is an absurd, industry-driven canard. There's been study after study after study in high gravitas journals by the best research organizations and institutions and universities around this country that shows that the autism epidemic is real. And Chris, it's also just common sense. If it was just a matter of better diagnosis or better recognition, you would see it in older people. You don't. The epidemic is taking place in a specific generation, and it's kids who were born after 1989. That's where you see it. You don't see, it's not, you don't see autism. 1 in every 31 people my age. I have never seen somebody my age, 71 years old, with full-blown autism. That means profound autism. That means nonverbal, non-toilet trained, head banging, stimming, or the stereotypical features of the disease. You don't see that. And these are not people who are locked in some institution somewhere. There are no places for people like that.
Right.
And so why, if it was anything other than an epidemic, why would you only see it in a single generation?
Right. No, fair point. And I'll turn the question on you because you're the one with the job to figure it out, and you will have a platform here to do so as any advances in our understanding is made. Secretary, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our News Nation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.